All right, we want to jump in?
Yep, we're just going to go ahead and go live right now.
All right, let's see what happens.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Oh, let me do the thing. Da, da, da.
Right, we need our intro music.
We're going to do our intro music. Dum, 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 dum. No, that's actually not it. Hey, welcome everybody to Wordsmith Writing Coaches, and this is called How to Write a Book Proposal, Translating It from Corporate Speak to Humanese. And you'll see the title right down there. I'm here with my friend Mike Rumley Wells, and we're going to talk more about, we're going to continue our discussion about Jody Rein and Michael Larson's book, How to Write a Book Proposal, which is an excellent book. I believe it's the best book on the market and the only single volume primer on the publishing industry that I know of. It's just excellent. However, it is written completely unintentionally, I'm sure, from a certain perspective, and some people, like Mike Rumley Wells here, um, find it difficult to get past a lot of the trigger words that she uses in this, and I totally understand, uh, because I had a similar problem when I started this kind of thing about 15 years ago, and I had a lot of introspection that I had to go through to come to grips with all this, but but um, Mike has just go ahead and show them your. So this is the book that we're talking about,
This is the
and
book.
it's
This
got
is
some
the
battle
spine
damage.
damage from being tossed across the room, not gently.
Yes, yes. So tell me what inspired hurling the book across the room against the wall?
um, there have been different triggers at different points in the book, but I guess the big picture would be that the book, while thorough and exhaustive, um, makes writing sound like a means to manipulate people in order to make money. And that is not my purpose in writing. And in some ways, the antithesis of what I consider my calling as a writer. I would like to earn money writing, but it's not a tool I want to use to trick people into giving me money. Um, and I mean, that's a kind of gross way to say it. And yet, as Nick and I talked about last time, when you get a quote like 10% of being a writer is writing and 90% is marketing, you really have to kind of think through that for it not to sound like, okay, the main thing we're doing here is sales.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of writing.
Instead of writing, which if you're a writer, really you'd like to be writing.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, that is the number one reason why writers seek traditional publication these days, is because they want to focus on the writing,
Yes.
and they want a traditional publisher to handle as much of the rest of it as possible.
Yes.
Um, so, uh, on the other hand, as Jody Rein and Michael Larson explain so eloquently in this book, uh, it's the 21st century, and the author does need to be involved in connecting with their audience. But even just then, like using the term, the author needs to be involved in connecting with their audience, I'm actually using a neutral term that bridges sort of the world that you and I live in and the world of traditional publishing, which is very commercial. It's very transactional focused. And because it borrows a lot of language, um, almost because it doesn't know that there is another lexicon that it can use. It borrows a lot of language
Mhm.
from the world of commercial marketing, where humans are reduced to being customers,
Yes.
or even worse, sales.
Yes.
People talk about, oh, the my sales have increased this month, or my
Mhm.
sales have decreased this month, and um, if you understand that the person is just sort of intentionally speaking in a certain jargon because I don't know, they just are falling into it. Like that's one thing. But when the person is speaking like that because that is the that is the mental paradigm that they've actually adopted,
Hmm.
uh, it's sadly dehumanizing
Yes.
to take these people who who value your work enough that they would like to pay you money for it, and just not even think of them as being persons, but just think of them as numbers on a spreadsheet, to think of them as sales, to literally think of them as
Right.
transactions,
Yes,
is
exactly.
just deeply
Yeah.
unhealthy.
So, or another way that we've discussed it is, what is the bottom line in writing,
Hmm.
right? Is the bottom line the profit that you make after everyone gets their cut, or is the bottom line actually reaching people with something that you think will benefit them, whether that's entertain them or engage them or help them?
Hmm.
In my case, writing a book on grief, I want to walk through people's pain with them. The bottom
Yeah.
line is not ka-ching. The bottom line is I'm trying to kind of open up my life and painful parts of my life to say, you're not alone in this and you can survive this. I have, and I believe you will. That
Yeah.
feels very different than, okay, how many units can I push, right?
Right.
And as Nick and I have discussed, somehow as an author, you also do want to make a living. You would like
Sure.
to earn money. I mean, that's why I didn't just toss this one into the fireplace, threw it against the
Fortunately, it
wall.
is a wall.
Right, it hit the wall instead of landed in the fireplace. Because again, the I don't think this is irony. You'd have to ask Alanis Morissette. The challenge is this book is certainly well written for its purpose, and they are right. This is how one gets published by successfully by traditional publishing, by successfully writing a book proposal, and they know
Hmm.
how it works, and they have the inside scoop about the writing business, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this is where Nick and I Nick and I have decided that instead of burning these books, um, and instead of surrendering our deeper values, right, we're going to find a way to translate, to bridge these worlds, and say,
Yeah.
okay, you can be a moral writer. You can be someone who is seeking to offer your gift into the
Right.
world through your books, and still understand the business, and be shrewd enough to be
Yeah.
able to be a writer and a business person.
Yeah. Even if you're trying to do it for completely altruistic reasons.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, if you're an author who is genuinely motivated by altruism and you want to get your message out into the world to as many people as possible, um, it even though you're deciding not to turn a profit, like that is absolutely not your desire. You just want to get as many copies out there. If you can enlist the aid of your readers to help you get as many copies out there as possible, and if by buying that book, at least a portion of your readers can subsidize the distribution of more copies of that back to other people for free, then that's all the better. Um, and I think that's, well, sorry, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So today, last week, we said, yes, we're definitely going to talk about part two. We're going to get a little bit more into the book. So, because we talked about part one last week, um, at least sort of danced through it a little bit. But in part two on page 16, so we're going to be looking for triggers here and talking our way through those. So one of them for me came up on page 16, where there's a sidebar. It says hot tip, and I was telling Mike earlier, I maybe because um, when I was young, working with manuals and stuff like that, the hot tip was always something like, this bolt is going to be threaded backwards, so turn it this way to take it off of the. So, um, I always, yeah, so hot tip already, kind of gets off on the wrong foot a little bit. But then it says, can you prove through additional research that your book will appeal to consumers? If so, you've struck gold. Okay, well, I don't want to strike gold, and I don't want to appeal to consumers. I want to appeal to human beings.
Right.
Like,
And
I mean,
and the gold would be that they would benefit and connect with what I'm saying.
right. I want my readers to strike gold.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
So I know that because I've read a lot of what Jody Rein has written, and because I've watched uh, some video, well, at least one video interview with Jody Rein, and so I know that she would agree with us.
Mhm.
And so, Jody, if you ever watch these, I actually have to apologize to you. Mike and I do not mean to like tar you. Um, we don't think of you as intentionally having a transactional mindset that devalues human beings.
Yes.
But um, the language that is used in this book can definitely sound like that, especially if you come from our kind of background.
Yes.
So, so did you have a trigger here that you wanted to?
um, let's see. There are so many. Um, well, and we're trying to have like an honest and kind of substantive conversation.
Mhm.
So let us be honest.
Yeah.
There's another part of me, and I have been in ministry for most of my life, in Christian ministry. I did community development / missionary work in Nicaragua for 7 years. The goal has not been to get ahead in the traditional business sense, right? Still reading this book, there's a part of me that's also deeply disturbed by, why have I not succeeded? Right?
Yeah.
Even though I've chosen that that's not the world I'm trying to win, there's something about the and these hot tips, and if you only, and that kind of rubs that nerve that I thought was not exposed to
Yeah.
remind me, goodness, Mike, why at this age are you not already a multimillionaire successful author who's helping people with your work?
Yeah. Or at least a six-figure,
Yes.
like at least and by like earning six figures, I mean you know, like professionally successful in something.
Yes.
And yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So there's
I
this
face that too.
there's this walk, that we're trying to, in some sense, straddle two worlds here,
Oh,
um,
yeah, very
right?
much. Yeah.
And I find that when I, when I try to do that straddling, there's still some, you know, call of the Gordon Gecko, call of the, if you really wanted to have value, you would
Right.
succeed, and then everyone would
Yeah.
recognize your value.
Yeah.
That's not what I subscribe to as far as where my intrinsic value comes from as a human being, or
Yeah.
yours, or
Mhm.
anyone listening to this.
Yeah.
But that's where sometimes the book feels like it's kind of trying to reel you back in.
Yeah. Well, and it is. It is. I mean, not in the way that exactly that you're describing, but I agree with you. I feel the same feeling when I read this book or when I read other books where I know that in that book there are going to be very helpful, practical things that apply to my own, um, my running my own small business as wisely as possible.
Yes.
Because for me, it's about wisdom.
Yes.
I have a certain amount of resources. I have a certain amount of time and energy every day, and I want to invest those resources in other people and in future value as best I can.
Yes.
And I want my life to count for as much as possible in this
Yeah.
world. And I do not measure that value by accumulation of wealth. The problem is that I'll come at books like oh, like I hesitate to even bring it up, but Timothy Ferris, basically any book by Timothy Ferris, just makes me feel horrible
Hmm.
because I'm clearly, a complete failure at
You
life.
failed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But there are good things to be gleaned from those books. Um, Especially, well, we're not here to talk about Timothy Ferris's book, although we might in a future series. Uh, so Timothy Ferris, look out! We might take apart your
We're
book
coming
and
next.
talk about how horrible it makes us feel, and how badly it aligns with a human-centered
Yes.
understanding of of um, of community over
Yeah.
commerce. So anyway, the point is that um, Timothy Ferris books, but especially this book, like there's if I want to be successful in the world of publishing, and if I want my clients to be successful in the world of publishing, in this world where Jody and Michael live and thrive,
Mhm.
um, just like any other cross-cultural situation, I need to learn to speak a certain language. And this book is telling me the language that I need to learn how to speak.
Yes.
And I it's very helpful for me to know that uh, you know going back to that very first example I used on page 16, which is where there we go. Um, can you prove through additional research that your book will appeal to consumers? Uh, if so, you've struck gold. If not, consider self-publishing. And and by the way, that you know that casts, I think, possibly unintentional aspersions on self-publishing.
It does.
Um,
It's
but
gold or else self-publishing.
yeah, you know, yeah, if you've got a pile of rocks, you can
Yeah.
self-publish.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know that you know what she's because I've heard how she connects the dots
Hmm.
later on.
Hmm.
I know that when she's talking about reaching a market or appealing to consumers, I know that she's using a commercial marketing language to talk about actually building affinity and empathy with readers and helping make them into fans, making them into a community
Yeah.
who value what you have to say and who are convinced by the things that the people who find value in what it is that you're writing about, and people who appreciate how you express the things that you're writing about. Um, so um, um, so she's using this commercial language to actually talk about um, building a community, building a fan base,
Yeah.
basically, and even fan base. At least fan base is a more neutral term,
Yeah.
because the focus is really on the humans and
Yes.
the fact that they are fans.
Yes, then those are people, not units of
Yeah, yeah.
profit.
Units of commercial profit.
Yeah.
Yeah, or notches on your salesmanship gun belt.
Right.
You know, which is like, I mean, the metaphors just get more and more horrible, and she actually doesn't use the really horrible metaphors here. Um, but um,
I
so
think I will add one more thing
sure.
um, that the other like strong trigger for me in this is that reading through it, you get a strong sense of okay, you have to be able to do everything. You have to
Mm,
be able to write really well, and you have to be able to market really well, and you have to be able to research really well, and you have to be able to advertise really well. And also, you right? Um, and so again,
and do social media really
and
well.
do social media really well. And if you don't, perhaps you should self-publish,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and by the
Perhaps you
way, self-publishing wisely actually relies on you being able to do
all
all
of
those
that.
things
In fact,
yourself really
as a
well.
self-published
It's even
author,
worse, actually.
it's more work, right?
Yes,
As
it
Nick
is.
said, one of the reasons to seek traditional publishing is that somebody else will do some of that and you don't have to do all of it. As a
Right.
self-published author, it's all on you, every bit of it.
Well, yes. So actually, so the word yes. I mean, the Wordsmith Writing Coach's slogan is tell your story well and publish wisely.
Yes.
And part of publishing wisely is not publishing alone.
Yeah.
One of the man, one of the most difficult things for authors, whether they're traditional or self-published, is feeling really, really alone and feeling like all
Yes.
of this responsibility is just on you.
Yes.
Even if you have, I mean, if you can be um, traditionally published, especially with a smaller independent traditional
Yeah.
publisher, like well, like Camcat Publishing, for example, which I have some personal um, informal ties with. Um, I love how passionate the CamCat team is about the authors that they want to publish. And when people are pitching books to CamCat Publishing, I know some of the people on their team, and I know for a fact that they're not just looking at the value of the book and how much money is this book going to earn us over time.
Yeah.
They are absolutely looking at this book as a glimpse of who this author is,
Mm-hmm.
and how would this author relate to the readers, and will this author be easy for us to work with? Will this author take responsibility for some of these things? They're really, when you pitch your book, when you pitch yourself as an author to CamCat Publishing, and I don't mean to focus just on CamCat,
Right.
many
This is an example.
independent, yeah, many indie traditional publishers, and some uh, of the more creative hybrid publishers, um, they are definitely um, they're looking at you as a possible teammate.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why it's so important for agents. Agents will say, "Oh, well, it's really, really important that you not um, come across as a one-hit wonder."
Mm-hmm.
So, by the way, let's make sure we return to that, because the whole thing about coming across as something, and uh, the 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 way that that seems to encourage people to be deceptive really bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not come across as anything but what we actually are, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're a one-hit wonder, if you've got one book that you want to write, you know, sit down and talk with some people who understand publishing. Um, maybe you really should just self-publish that. If there's just one book that you've got to get off your chest, and you're okay if just your extended family read it,
Yeah.
and then occasionally you'll hand it out to friends, you know, um, when the occasion arises, then for goodness sake, don't knock yourself out and try to become, a represented author. If you're doing all this work for just one book, and then you don't want to be a writer, you don't want to return to
Right.
this craziness
Right.
again.
This
Like,
is something you want to be able to have said, and you don't want to pursue. Oh, what
right.
what else would I write about?
It I hate the way that many um, many resources for authors um, assume that everybody wants to be a career author, and assume that being a one-hit wonder is a bad thing.
Right.
And oh my gosh, we should never be that. I mean, yeah. Would that you had the privilege of being a one-hit wonder,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Like if you've got
Yes.
one book in you, let's hope it is a hit,
Right.
right?
Right.
um, but chances are that it's not going to be. But this is why agents and publishers want to hear from you that this is not your only book. It's be in order to stay in business, they do need to think about profitability.
Mhm.
That's definitely part of this.
Yeah.
But another part of it is um, they're going to invest a lot of time and work in you as an author, promoting you, and of course in your book, promoting your book, and and creating your book, producing your book. making it the best book that they possibly can, giving it a great cover and editing it and thinking about the interior layout and what should be on the back cover. Um, Publishers really sweat this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Um, and and that's great because the people who are sweating over it are people who've done it professionally,
Right.
and have way more insight than you or I do.
Right.
So, so these are some of the benefits
Yes.
of of
Yes.
traditional publishing. But the point is that you're joining a team,
Right.
and so if you do decide to self-publish, the importance of creating a team around you is just as great.
Mm.
Whether it's a, a critique group of other authors that you can talk through things with and go to them for practical advice, but also you go to them when you're pulling your hair out and you just feel like giving up, and or whatever,
I should
you
go
know.
live in a hole.
Yeah, I should go live in a hole, right? I don't know if I'm not going to put that comic up right now,
Okay.
but yes, we were laughing at one of those comics, but um, um,
The
but
community that you need.
yeah, whether you publish, whether you self-publish, or um, uh, whether you traditionally publish, oh my gosh, you really, really, really need a team. Don't publish alone.
Yeah.
Publishing alone is not wise. And one of the problems with some traditional publishing, one of the negative things that you'll hear over and over again from people who are leaving traditional publishing,
Yeah.
is that they got a traditional publishing contract and they felt like they were treated like a cog in a machine.
Hmm.
They feel like they were treated like um, a source of income and a source of work, of labor, and they were not a team member. They didn't get to know their editors, or
Yes.
they didn't feel personally or professionally supported
Hmm.
by their own publisher. Well, no wonder they're leaving. And this is
Yeah.
not publishing wisely for the traditional publisher.
Right.
Like,
Right.
how many good authors are you losing because you're not treating them like human beings? You're not
Yes.
treating them like team members,
Yes.
building community with them. So it's just interesting that the people who don't use the community-based lexicon that you and I do
Hmm.
will actually be thinking in these community-based terms. They just have to come up with markety sorts of words to describe it, um, which is really it's helpful for you and I to remember that,
Yes.
because then we can read books like this with a little more grace.
Yeah.
So
Always a
let's
good thing.
just to be helpful with people. Um, do do you want to suggest a trigger in section
Um,
2?
let's see. Um, no, you jump in this time, Nick.
Okay, sure. Um, So there's a couple of them. One of them, I I don't remember what exactly I saw that made me write this note in the margins. But what I wrote in the margin here, oh yeah, this is a good one. We'll come back to that one in a second. Um, what I wrote in the margin here was using people for selfish ends
Mm-hmm.
versus serving people for higher motives. Um,
Wow.
and
Was that before I told you that I have trouble with this book, Nick? Was that your actual
no,
initial response to this?
No, no, this is after that you and I
Oh, okay.
talked, and I was like, "Huh,
Okay.
I'm gonna go through the book and look for
And
some
look
of these
for it.
triggers."
Nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
This was th
Uh-huh.
this was inspired by that. I had only underlined practical things in this book until you and I talked, and then I realized, oh yeah, that's true. I did have to sort of learn this new publishing culture.
Yeah.
How did I do that? So um, so yes. I think it had to do with a quote from Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and the
Okay.
idea of being an effective person. And how do you measure
Yes.
effectiveness?
Right.
Is it does like, because the funny thing is, you know what? Let's just a quick digression about Stephen
Sure.
Covey. he's a perfect example of this, because Stephen Covey does not disagree with you and me.
Mm-hmm.
But Stephen Covey does use all of this um, sort of crass commercial language, and he speaks in that paradigm. Um, and so, like, just think about like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you read that book, correct me if I'm wrong. I read that book a long time ago, but I read it very carefully.
Uh-huh.
And um, uh, ironically, well, it doesn't matter. The context in which I read it is a little bit ironic. But we carefully studied it chapter by chapter. It was kind of like in a book club.
Mm-hmm.
And although Stephen Covey says over and over in that book that your human impact is and your human worth is far more important than your financial worth. Like
Yes.
he does emphasize things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when he talks about highly effective people, like when he gives you examples of highly effective people, virtually all of them show up on his radar as highly effective because they are either, you know, they're either famous or very wealthy
Yes.
because of their, and they've become wealthy because of their own efforts, which is great. Yay, uh, Elon Musk and Henry Ford and like people who become wealthy because of their own efforts. Ken and Jean Neal, good friends of mine, like those guys started out with very little
Yeah.
and built their personal net worth into something really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, they did it by serving their customers, serving human beings better than their competition did.
Yes.
Um, and um, it's just interesting that Stephen Covey didn't pick um, like Paralympic athletes, coaches.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't pick um, uh, elementary school teachers
Yeah.
as highly effective people.
Yes.
Like everybody who occurred to him as highly effective people
Mm-hmm.
were CEOs and entrepreneurs
Yeah.
um, and musicians
Yes.
or artists who have become famous.
Right.
Um, so it's just and I think that Stephen Covey himself would be the first person to say, "Oh no, no, look at this part of my book where
Right.
I say just the opposite." And
Yes.
it's like, yes, Stephen, I saw that part of
You
your book,
do.
but but you know, those are not the first people you think of. You think of
Right.
them as exceptions.
Yes. Right. You say that,
So,
but these are the examples you always use.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Forgive me.
so I hope that
Forgive
inspires you to find something. Um,
me.
let's see.
Now, lest we sound like we're trying to find all the negative things we can about this book, I actually really like chapter 5 of part 2,
Okay.
because as someone who can easily uh, get overwhelmed by the you know massive task with no clear handles to grab onto. um,
Mm-hmm.
yes, exactly, the practically painless proposal writing
Proposal writing
system.
system. Yep.
Yes. um, Accomplishing a task provides a built-in incentive to move on to the next task with increased enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm.
um, the whole, here's a system, here's the order, let's go piece by piece, that's marvelous for someone like me. i
Mm-hmm.
I had to take a psychological evaluation once to be part of an organization, to be part of servant partners, which was going to work with people living in poverty. So we realized, okay, it's not that you want a sane, you just want a certain level of crazy. We don't want you past the pale
Right.
of crazy, but we want you like in this range of crazy.
Crazy
And
enough that you'll do okay in this
yes,
setting.
exactly. Crazy enough that you're willing to go, not so crazy that you'll implode when you get there. Truly.
Those are very good parameters.
They really are. And when I was taking this test, the specific task was look at this map, right? Give
Hmm.
yourself whatever 90 seconds to take it in, and
Hmm.
now on this blank sheet, draw exactly what you saw, right?
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
failed miserably at this task. And not only did I fail at it, I got very angry, like actually
Interesting.
really angry. Yeah, it was. It was
You're
interesting how
you're you're
badly.
looking at this list, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
It was
Interesting.
interesting how badly it triggered me. And I realized, with a little debriefing from the person administering my test, that feeling of being overwhelmed, right? That
Mm,
feeling of being lost in this monstrous task with no idea how to grab hold is something I really dislike. um,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
and her input, this really fits nicely, Nick. Her input was, don't then try to do some big task alone, right? Have a team and figure out what part of the task you're great at,
Yes.
right? Feels
Yes.
appropriate as an example, would you not say?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
really appreciate Jody and Michael saying, okay, this looks big, but you don't have to do big all at once, right? You don't
Hmm.
have to build the mountain. You have to move this rock, and
Yeah.
then this rock, and then this rock. And in fact, we think that if you do the rocks in this order, they're less likely to tumble back on you.
Yeah.
So, lots of appreciation for understanding that, someone like me who's not naturally organized
Yeah.
finds this really helpful.
Yeah. And can I say, because I've been making a big deal about word choice
Mm-hmm.
in all of these things, and this was a note that I wrote before you and I started talking. Um, but uh, I really like her choice of A. Milne's quote here. Organizing is what you do before you do something, so that when you do it, it's not all mixed up.
It's such a great
But I
quote.
love the fact that she chose the word organizing instead of outlining,
Mm-hmm.
because in so many other because I had Googled a lot of how to write a book proposal. I had read a lot of blog posts and watched several YouTube videos that were not as helpful as you might hope. Very salesy, but
Mm-hmm.
not as helpful
Right.
as one might hope.
Yes.
Um, and
Understood.
um, uh, and almost all of them use the word outlining. Like you have to outline your proposal,
Mm-hmm.
and A, B, C, one, two, three. And um, as a writing instructor, as a writing coach, for years I have fought against the word outlining because um, so many students think of outlining as the only way to prepare your information for writing.
Yes.
And it's so, we use the term pre-writing.
Mm.
And so anywhere that you see the word pre-writing
Mm-hmm.
instead of outlining, those are people from my camp of how to write. We're the PDREP people, you
Speaking
know.
of being an influential person.
Oh, I don't know about influential. It's more like they're influential. I discovered it. I mean, I remember learning the PDREP writing process when I was in junior high,
Wow.
and
Uh-huh.
somewhere along the line, they've stopped teaching it in public
Mhm.
schools,
Hmm.
and they don't teach it in most colleges either, from what I can tell. But I'll have grad students. I'll say, and then the writing process, PDREP, PDREP,
Mhm.
pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and proofreading and polishing. And they'll stare at me like I just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. It's like,
What
well, I've
can you be
never
laughing
heard this before.
at?
Like, guys, so we
Why? Why even at it? Yeah.
we do a lot of retraining. We do
Hmm.
a lot of
Yeah.
bringing people along who've missed the who just haven't had a good writing education in the past.
Yes.
And writing coaches like myself, and there are thousands of us, I'm
Hmm.
certainly not the only one, but writing coaches like myself, we spend a lot of time bringing people up to speed on, like, I don't necessarily tell my graduate students this, but some of the materials that I use with my grad student clients
Hmm.
are actually eighth grade materials. I'm literally like,
Yes.
I could pull the book out. It must be upstairs. But yeah, I have like 4 books that are from, well, 8th grade and 10th grade,
Yes.
um, writing instruction, and they're excellent books, and they
Right.
date back to like 1983 or 1991 or something like that.
Hmm.
And yeah, they're great books. I just, I use those same writing exercises with grad students. I just don't tell them that what we're learning here, you could have learned this in 9th grade. It would have been good if you had
Right.
learned this in 9th grade. But
Yeah.
since you didn't and you need the skill now, let's go ahead and
There it is.
let's go
Yeah.
ahead and cover it.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
just do it with super fancy words,
I guess the positive of that is, at least at one point in school, they were teaching this well.
Yes, that's true. I lucked out. I
Mhm.
went to a public elementary school, public junior high, public high school, and I got a pretty good education.
Yeah.
And then I really lucked out and went to the Claremont colleges. But
Yeah.
that was it's actually amazing that I got into the Claremont colleges.
Hmm.
Coming from
Yes.
um, a purely public school, rural public school
Hmm.
background.
Right. Right.
But I had teachers who were passionate, and I was
Yeah.
hungry to learn,
Hmm.
and I had very supportive parents who valued learning,
Yeah.
and who would make sacrifices so that I could follow up those opportunities. And there's a whole other story about learning disabilities and not discovering that I am not neurotypical and those challenges, but we're not going to get into that now. Um,
Another session.
yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that you like chapter 5 as much as I do. The funny thing is that we should say that chapter 5 is literally 3 pages, two and a
Just three
half
pages.
pages. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, in the book,
I
there's
mean,
this,
take
this
the
page, this
positive where
page,
you
and this
find them,
page.
right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's so much positive here. Like
Yes.
this is a typical the very next section,
Hmm.
set up your shop.
Hmm.
This very next section, actually, set up your shop. Well, we'll get into that later.
Right.
You could say set up your studio.
You could.
Uh,
I would.
set up your creative nest. Um, but you can't think yourself out of a writing block. You have to write yourself out of a thinking block. I
Mhm.
have found that quote so helpful to me over the years.
Hmm.
I think I must have seen this quote somewhere else before I saw it in this book.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Um, but anyway, it's great. Um, And before we go on though from chapter 5,
Yeah.
I think I just I should mention that this quote over here from Tony Robino of Windward.
Yes.
Yeah, she's actually an acquaintance of mine. I know her. We see each
I
other at
wondered
conferences.
that. That
Yeah,
that looked familiar. Yes.
that's the same Tony Robino that you met at the
Nice.
last conference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she's super cool. So I'm glad that she is quoted in this book.
Yes.
Um, anyway, so yeah, the setting up shop. That is just it's so practical. It's practical, and it's not focused on um it's focused on the creative process and the
Yes.
productivity process. It's not focused on salesmanship.
Yes.
So I didn't see any uh problems here. And I'm glad that they talk about Scrivener and Evernote and OneNote.
Hmm.
Uh yeah, Google Drive is great. I prefer it much I prefer it hugely over Dropbox.
Hmm.
Um,
Google Drive you like better than Dropbox?
oh yeah, much better. But I
Mhm.
do not like the Google Docs. I mean,
Mm.
it's okay
Right.
if you for some reason you cannot use Word or Scrivener.
Hmm.
Google Docs is better than being left out in the cold.
Gotcha.
Um, but and Google Docs is great when you have to work simultaneously with someone on the
Yes.
document. I
Yes.
found that sharing a document in Google Docs goes much smoother and demands less of your computer than sharing a document in Microsoft Word. In
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft Word, it is possible to share a document, but oh boy,
Yeah.
someone is going to crash unless you both have pretty hot computers.
Gotcha.
Hot in a performance sense, not in a thermal challenged, not thermally challenged. Um, So anyway,
Nice.
build your folder buckets. Um, I don't know if this one had any triggers for you or not. It didn't for me because it's again, it's very process oriented. But I did notice like the ideas of um, yeah, if it didn't trigger anything in you, that's fine. Now, the proposal writing order could be interesting, especially when the number one thing on the list on page 40 in the fifth
Yes.
edition, the
Mm-hmm.
number one thing on the list has to do with pizzazz and
Pizzazz.
how important it is to have pizzazz. Unfortunately,
And I think we've already
certain
discussed
topics,
pizzazz,
well,
so
you and
you
I,
know that that's a trigger for me.
yeah. I mean, did we discuss it on
Not
a
on here. No,
serious?
not on here. Just previously.
Okay.
That was.
Well,
I think that was one of my first things that I told you, Nick. I hate this book. Let's talk
yes.
about pizzazz.
I think it was like the very first thing that you shared with me. Yeah. Because here we are talking about grief and
Yes.
walking through people, walking
Yes.
through people grieving the loss of a child. And how do you
Yes.
sprinkle pizzazz on that? Like, can
Yes.
you
It would be
imagine anything more fake? Oh my
precisely.
gosh. And
Precisely. And
distasteful.
can you imagine anything more discordant than trying to
Yeah,
put pizzazz together with grief and bereaved parents
exactly.
and surviving this sorrow, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no pizzazz for that.
Yeah. So, and I think at the time I probably said something like this, but I'll say it again here for people who are listening.
Mhm.
Like if Jody Rain were here, the third person in this conversation, she would say, "Well, Mike, of course you don't want, pizzazz, so to speak, in a book about grief, but the point of pizzazz is, as she says, um, uh, learning about the elements that inspire editorial enthusiasm." Okay, so what would make an editor excited about another book about grief?
Yes.
Well, it's not going to be pizzazz,
Right.
right? I mean, that's
Right.
just going to turn the editor off just as much as it turns you and me off.
One would hope.
Oh, I guarantee you. Having known some acquisition
Yeah.
editors in my day,
Yes.
actually quite a few of them, yeah,
Hmm.
no, they would be horrified. Um,
Like here's our razzle dazzle that I want to tell you about my grief book.
yeah, exactly. Well, I'm wearing my
That
pink
should
tutu.
that
Let's
should
talk
turn
about
your
death.
stomach, right?
Yeah,
That should turn
exactly.
your stomach. Yeah.
Yeah,
So this is a classic case of okay, we need to translate. If this
exactly.
if this is a useful idea for my
Mhm,
book proposal, right?
mhm.
Because I want this
Yeah,
book published,
yeah,
then what in this context can we mean by pizzazz?
yeah.
And
So,
what better word can we use?
okay, so think in terms of Venn diagrams,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So here's the circle over here. Wait, let's put it over here. Here's a circle over here, which is what is meant by the word pizzazz and
When
what
Nick does the
pizzazz
edit, you're going to
accomplishes.
be able to see a Venn diagram. Continue.
I should do that. And over here is let me take the words right out of Jody Rain's book. Um, Elements that inspire editorial enthusiasm about a book about grief. Because,
Yes.
let me give you a little bit of context. People write about grief all the time, all the time. And most books about grief and overcoming grief are memoirs.
Hmm.
So they see a lot of these books. And unfortunately, these books about grieving tend to blur together. And of course, books, wow, that is a loud dog. Is there any way of
I can
moving that
mute.
dog out
Yeah,
of the room?
sorry, I said that I would do that in the.
Oh, you did? Oh, I didn't see the. Oh, yep, there it is. Ah, okay. Well, anyway, thank you. So, um, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So Venn diagrams. So here's what pizzazz means. Um, Pizzazz is something that attracts people's attention and makes them look more closely at something. It's something that sets you apart from the pack. So if the pack over here about grief is all about, um, my mother died, my spouse died, my child died. I went through the standard stages of grief. I cried a lot. Here's a metaphor that I found really gripping, but then the metaphor is not really very well explained, or it's kind of a weird metaphor. Like, why did that metaphor help them? I don't understand. And or here's a Bible verse that just means the world to me, and we don't necessarily know why, because you're not explaining that very well. You're not unpacking that. You're not bringing us into that passage of scripture, or that poem by Rumi, or whatever poetic quote you've chosen, which meant so much to you in your grieving process. So like every book about grief has those things in it, and they all feel like they're the same. So we certainly don't want pizzazz. I mean, that would be horrifying. But we do want something that will set you apart from other people. So generally speaking, the if we move those two, make those two overlap, right? Like all the parts of pizzazz, whoops, pizzazz is over here. All the parts of pizzazz that are like sparkly and happy and glittery and entirely painfully superficial, like clearly there's no overlap. We'll just ignore all those. And all the things which are um, cliche and trite and shallow and um, just sound like everybody else's experience of grief, those don't overlap with pizzazz. So we'll leave those out. So we're left with this little oval in the middle. And this oval in the middle finally is helpful to us. The oval in the middle is like, okay, how does my work uh, how does my work, uh, how is my work different from how other people have gone through this? And
Yeah.
so what people want, especially what your acquisitions editor is going to want is more depth, um,
Hmm.
more more honesty, more thinking things through, both thinking through what happened to you and in you, and also thinking through um, the ideas that you have um, like the things that people say to you, because there's kind of a lot of, I mean, you know this as well as I do, there are kind of a lot of um thank you, there are kind of a lot of sort of trite things, stereotypical things that people will say to a person who is grieving the death of a loved one. Oh, they're in a better place now. I mean, it just go down the list. I don't even want to say them all, because I don't want to trigger anybody who's listening to us. Um, but it can be painful to hear all those things. And it's even worse to think that that's all there is. Like my only hope is to somehow think of these trite, superficial things in such a way that I find comfort in them. I just have to somehow force myself to do that. And if I can't, there's something wrong with me, because apparently the entire rest of the world hears someone say, "Oh, they're in a better place now." And they're like, "Oh, what? That never occurred to me. Oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Well, thank you for bringing that up." Said
Yeah.
virtually no one ever, right? And
Right.
yet people just keep saying it as if that's going to happen
And yet,
someday to someone.
yes.
Yeah. So
Right.
so so it's those things in the middle that will
Hmm.
set you apart, and they're not the sparkly, oops, sorry, they're not the sparkly pizzazzy things. They are they are not the shallow things. There's something deep and unique about your experience of grief, and because it's unique, it'll be a fresh take on something that everybody experiences, and everybody hears the same trite things over and over again. And And there are so many books out there about grief that are just, it's a good try. Like, I'm glad that you weighed in. I'm glad you care. I'm glad you want to share um, something of your life, and they're just not very helpful to a very wide group of people.
Mhm.
And notice how I chose my words carefully there,
Yes.
because Jody Rein and Michael Larson would say they are not commercially viable.
Yes. That's how they
And
would say it.
but that's the same thing.
Hmm.
So as as authors who want our books to be commercially successful, not because that's our goal, but because that is a means to our goal,
Yes.
then it it we need to allow Jody Rain and Michael Larson to say, look, it's not going to be commercially viable if you do it this way. And
Hmm.
we need to not get stuck on the trigger. It's like, I don't want to be commercially viable. Yes, yes, I know. I know. So it's this other thing. When they say
Yes.
commercially viable, they mean help as many
Right.
people as possible.
Yes.
So,
Right. Right. Exactly. And let's bracket there for a second. If I hear commercially viable and I think sellout, right?
yes.
Then that's like nails in the chalkboard for me, and I'm going to push against what you're
Ah,
saying. But
mhm.
if I say, okay, now you have, you know, amplified my voice so that more people can uh, receive this message of compassion and encouragement, that feels really different, right? It's the same thing, right? Now, however much money you want to make, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
just
it.
different terminology takes on a more positive or negative, more pejorative,
Yeah.
or right. But
Well,
it's
now remember, it could be the same thing,
yes,
and that's the
yes,
problem.
right.
Is that the problem with this kind of crass transactional language, which could possibly reduce uh, our efforts to being purely self-centered and
Yes.
self-focused,
Hmm.
and in its worst form, manipulative,
Right.
actively manipulative,
Yes.
to just try to get money out of people.
Yes.
Um, so the problem is that the language like not commercially viable could mean that.
Hmm.
It doesn't clearly mean this other thing.
Right.
So
Right.
so so
And frankly, this isn't all one big misunderstanding that Nick and Mike are having. Some people do think in those terms,
oh, absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
So
sure they
we
do.
we are being honest that we're trying to navigate this while steering clear of a certain section that
Hmm.
that is what matters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah, so I can think of some examples, but I won't name them. Who for
Yes,
whom it really is
for whom
that
it's
way.
that. Right.
Yeah. So I just want to give you an example of someone else who has struggled with this exact thing about being a sellout, like you used the
Yes.
word sellout.
Hmm.
So my friend Russell Nolte
Oh my
wrote
God.
wrote a book. You would love this book.
Oh, that's marvelous.
Yes.
I
Uh,
would pay money for that book. I
oh,
can
you
tell you
should.
from the cover, I would pay money for that book.
You really should actually buy this book. It
Mm.
it it is Russell Nolte is kind of a genius at um oh yeah, see I need to read the dedication here, but just in a second. So Russell Nolte is a genius at marketing,
Mhm.
and one of the reasons that he is because he never forgets that successful marketing is successfully um, doing something of profound value for another human being.
Mm.
He has courses
Mm.
on his website like how to build a
Wow.
rabid fan base,
Yes.
not how to sell a million books.
Yes.
See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Not how to earn $1 million,
Yes.
how to build a rabid fan base.
Yes.
because the humans are what's important.
Right.
And if you do that, the income will follow.
Yes.
So this is his dedication in the book. Dedicated to every fan who has asked my advice over the last several years through emails, at shows, or at signings. You are the reason I do what I do, and I hope this book gets you further down the path of success.
Nice.
That is the right
Yes.
reason to
Absolutely. Yes.
market a book. So
Yes.
when Russell Nolte is marketing and advertising and writing ad copy, and you know with complete with a completely clear conscience,
Yeah.
using all the sales triggers, which in the wrong person's hands would absolutely be manipulation,
Hmm.
just crass manipulation.
Yeah.
But he is able to use all those sales triggers and funnel and all this stuff, and he even teaches about it, and it's excellent. Um, he um, he is able to do all those things with a clean conscience and with enthusiasm,
Yeah.
because he knows that because he knows he's doing it wisely. He knows that he is not appealing to people who will not like the content or will not profit from it. As a
Hmm.
matter of fact, this talks a little bit about author branding here.
Yeah.
Um, he has a very clear brand. Wannabe Press is his thing. I'm just looking to see if he has the little bee. He's got this a little cartoon
Hmm.
drawing of a bee. Folder, the attitude, eyes are folded, and kind of. I can't do it, but you'll see. Go to his
Wannabe.
website, and you'll see the wannabe, right?
Wannabe. Uh-huh.
Wannabe Press, yeah,
It's
and
awesome.
with the attitude. Um, I think the bee's name is Belinda. I can't remember. I'm sorry, Russell, if I gave the wrong name for the bee, but but you know, interestingly enough, even though you and I love this cover,
Hmm.
um, because this is exactly why we have trouble with marketing and
Yes.
salesmanship. However, you know, he's not married to his own ideas,
Mm.
nor is he married to um, a title which appealed strongly to him.
Hmm.
He wants his book to have a title that will appeal to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So, because of little devil horns on here, it did actually put off some people who could otherwise really appreciated the book.
Yeah.
So, this is his new version of the same book,
Oh, wow.
exactly the same content.
Seriously?
Yes.
Huh?
I mean, he's revised it a little bit.
Sure.
I I believe that I believe there's more in here about like subscription models and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But basically, it's the same book,
Wow.
just with a new cover and a little bit updated
Yeah.
on the inside. In fact, I believe it has almost the exact same
Oh,
back,
yep.
as the other one. It's a little different.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little more
and and and
colorful and
and
fewer
see
devils.
yeah, and see the little bee with the.
Oh,
See, I I
yeah.
I thought I thought that the bee with the halo made up for the E with the devil on the front, but
Balanced out the.
apparently other people didn't notice that. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought it was great, but this is the new look.
Yeah.
So and it's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the same content, same author, and it's also been, slightly a little bit more has been added. Um, but it just, I just really liked that first cover because it was provocative in all the right
Yes.
ways.
Yes. I
So
mean, that's some pizzazz right there.
yeah, exactly. And it's not like sprinkly,
Right.
sparkly pizzazz.
Right.
It's pizzazz in that it comes right out and says,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a great
This is
conversation.
different. This makes it stand out. And this is
Mhm.
actually the substance
Yeah,
that, I'm kind of startling you with.
Yeah.
in a way
Yeah.
that at least for me, makes me, oh, I want to read that.
Yeah. And he
So,
tells a story sometimes about talking with, this is back when he was a comics creator.
mhm,
Or anyway, it was a long time ago. I mean, he still creates comics, but this was early in his career,
yes.
and he was, working with other comics creators, and of course, I've heard this third hand, so I apologize, Russell, if I get some of the details wrong here. But the way I remember him telling the story was that um, people would get into gripe sessions about how, being a tortured artist, and if you're true to your art, then, you'll never be wealthy and successful. But if you get wealthy and successful, it's because you sold out
And you
to the
can't have been true
man.
to your art. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Because you're a sellout.
Hmm.
Exactly what you said.
Yes.
And what he heard, over and over again from, I guess, from different people, or maybe just from one person who was particularly vociferous about it, was, oh yeah, don't, those people, they sold their soul.
Hmm.
I'm not going to sell my soul.
Yeah.
And I guess that one phrase really bothered him. Oh yeah, and they would also talk bad about the comic book creators who did become successful and who left their little group.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people left behind were like, oh, blah, 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 he sold his soul, gripe,
Right.
gripe. And and Russell's like, wait, what? Like, isn't that what we all want? Like, he's
Right.
making a living as a comic book artist. Isn't
Right.
that, and a comic
We're
book writer?
we're in a group
Like, that's a good thing.
supporting one another to get there.
Right, exactly. And we're bad mouthing him. Like, in what way did he sell his soul? I think he kind of sold his book. He didn't sell his soul, he sold his skill.
His
He sold
art. He
his,
sold his
yeah, yeah,
art.
he sold his art. Yeah. So but the selling part is what
Yeah.
really grated on
Hmm.
certain people.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it's not that. So that's why that first version of that book has that, the title Sell Your Soul,
Yes.
because he's speaking exactly to you and me,
Hmm.
to people who we just don't ever want to sell our soul for profit.
Right.
We don't want to be a sellout, so to speak, and all those negative connotations. But on the other hand, so okay, this came out of what may have been a personal conversation between him and I. I'm not sure if he's had this particular part of the conversation with other people, but we were talking about the, selling your soul, and he said to me, Nick, what else does a creative have to sell? We don't have anything else to sell but our soul.
Wow.
And if you're not putting your heart and soul into all of
Wow.
your work,
Wow.
now who's being manipulative? Now
Yeah.
who's being shallow?
Right.
You'd better be selling your soul
Yeah.
because you have nothing else genuine to
What are you
sell.
selling then? Wow. Empty
And that's
boxes. Oh, that's a
that
total mind blower. Right.
blew my
Right.
mind.
I mean, yeah, because let's dig into this for a second. We know the reason that, sell your soul is offensive. It's because of, you know, Faustus,
Because
right?
you're
It's
selling it for
because,
money, right? He's selling it
right.
for fame and
I'm
money
making an
and worldly
exchange
success.
between all the essence of what makes me a human being, right? And I'll give you that if I can have wealth and fame, right? It's the whole, Nickelback. I'll do
That's the
whatever it
Faustian
takes,
bargain. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a
Yep.
Faustian bargain, right?
Yeah.
You know, but I love that really turns the paradigm on its head,
Yes.
right? That's
Yeah.
genius
Yeah.
because, in a sense, right, I am like, what I want to do is pour my soul out on paper, you know,
Exactly.
or screen
Yes.
or Kindle,
Yeah.
right?
Or
I want
comic
I
book
want
or
to pour that out in such a
yeah.
way that I'm sharing, one of my friends described my writing as reckless vulnerability.
Yes.
And I love that because hell yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's what I want. I want to be like actually reckless in being vulnerable with the hope that that will help others to feel less alone,
Hmm.
less like less discouraged in
Yeah.
the, I'm the only one who feels this way, and I am doomed to be alone in this, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah.
And the only way I know to do that, rather than the platitudes, right?
Well, because
rather
those
than
don't work. Yeah.
rather than God has a plan, right? The only way I know to offer you're not alone is, let me show you, right? Let me offer my soul to you, which
Yeah.
frankly has been tortured more than once.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's my dark night of the soul, and I offer that to you, right? That is in a sense offering up my soul,
It
right?
is.
I'm not
Exactly.
offering facade. I'm trying to let you in. So that
That's
is
right.
that is genius. As you can see, that really has like triggered me in the right way.
See?
That's
I'm
really
glad.
set me off. Like, that's brilliant. I do want to do that, right? Another way that I've heard writing described is, writing is simple, right? Simply hold your arm out, open a vein,
Yeah.
and bleed on the
Well,
page.
the Robert Fowler quote is,
Yes.
"Writing is easy. Just stare at a blank page until drops of blood form on your forehead." That's
Yes.
the Robert Fowler, the classic
Yes.
Robert Fowler
Yes.
quote.
That's
Yeah.
that. Exactly. But I like the open a vein because it's
Ah.
not incidental. It's what I'm offering. I'm
For those of
offering.
you, just, I'm gonna insert a little trigger warning on the edited version of this.
Yes,
Like, if
of
you
bleeding.
struggle
Yes.
with cutting,
I'm
just
offering.
click advance 30 seconds twice, and then we're good. Sorry,
Yes,
carry on,
please.
Mike.
Yes, please. Not trying to set off anybody's. I understand about compulsive behavior too. That
Mm.
too, I can, offer my soul in. I'm offering my lifeblood. I'm offering my soul with the belief that that won't run my soul out, right? Because here's the
Oh,
other
it
thing.
won't. Yeah.
The whole, well, what if you sell your soul? What can you give in exchange for your soul, right? Somebody said that. And
Well, yeah.
if
Well, one of the points that Russell had was that we're creatives.
yes,
Like, I can I can pour my heart and soul into a work and sell it, and I still have my heart and my soul.
precisely.
I'm not losing it.
And
I
that's
am giving from it.
yes,
And
yes,
the more of it goes out into the world
yes,
and encourages people and makes them happy and makes them
yes,
feel like someone understands them and
exactly. I'm
it makes them
I'm
think new
offering
thoughts.
that up. No,
Hmm.
precisely. And
But
I will
you're not
say,
losing it. A
no,
Faustian bargain, you lose what you have.
precisely. And there's no getting it back,
Right. But not
right?
in this. Not in
Not in
this
this.
way.
No. And I will say, I have certainly experienced the difference. You come to the end of a book and you feel like, oh, they didn't really, really that was kind of I got ripped off, right? Like, you come to the
Yeah.
end of a novel and you feel like, oh, they took the easy way out and
Mm.
they were just selling a book, versus
Mm.
you come to the end of a novel feeling kind of like shattered and wrung out. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, the only way I got there is if you offered up all of that from deep within you, and I've joined you on that journey, right? Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's not like, okay, and now you have no more soul to offer. In a sense, your soul is enlarged
Exactly.
because you were courageous enough to offer it up. I really
Yeah.
believe that. I
I
really
agree.
believe that, right? I mean,
Yep.
in a sense, that is spiritual growth. Spiritual growth is I'm willing to extend myself and offer myself to others. And that doesn't
Yeah.
diminish me, right?
That's
Diminishing is
true.
when I refuse to give myself for others,
Yes.
right?
That's true.
Extending myself, right? And that, dang it, that's the risk. That's that's why I'm
Yeah.
here with this thing, right? Because the risk is you offer that up and everybody's like, nah.
And that hurts.
And that hurts so
If
bad.
if you really poured your heart and soul into something and you say, look, it's my heart and soul, and people go, "Eh, not my jam." That that hurts.
So much,
Eh,
so much.
yeah,
And let me jump in then. That's why you need to wrestle through a book like this, because
exactly.
you might not fail to get your book published because it sucks or your soul doesn't matter. It's because you didn't know how to make it through this maze.
exactly. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And,
And say that a better way for me, Nick, because make it through the maze still sounds like you're a rat.
like a rat.
What is a
I,
better
d-
way to say that?
I don't like the rat race mazes. Yeah.
I know.
The
What's a
like
better way
who
to
moved my cheese?
right?
That book
What's a
completely
better
left me
way
cold.
to like? What's a better framework
Well,
for
well, let's follow this soul metaphor, this
yes?
sharing of your soul
Hmm.
metaphor here. Um, so if you're sharing your soul, because by the way, I use the words, that's not my jam, intentionally because
Okay,
I'm actually quoting Russell,
gotcha.
because that is something that he, that's just sort of the way that he talks, right? Like,
Uh huh.
oh yeah, that's my jam, or oh, that's not my jam.
That's not my
So
jam.
because um, when you have created this beautiful little thing and you say, look, here's my heart and soul, and someone says, meh, that's not my jam, that means they are not saying your heart and soul have no value.
Right.
What they're saying is, that's not my jam. Like, this thing you've created, it doesn't strike a chord in me.
Yes.
Like, it's like, that's not what I like. You pour your heart and your soul into writing a poem and you show it to a science fiction fan, and they're like, in what way is this science fiction? This is not science fiction. This is a poem. And it could be a wonderful poem, but they don't
Right.
know because they're not into poetry, because
Yes.
poetry is not their jam.
Yes.
So that is what wise marketing does.
Hmm.
And it's what this is something we can talk about this later, or maybe it's just painfully obvious in this book. Um, One of the great things about this book are the insights that Jody and Michael give us to how to find an agent or a publishing company which wants what we've written.
Yes.
Like, what we've written, that's their jam.
That's their jam. That's the jam that we
That's
need.
what we want. Now, if that person says, oh, this is not acceptable, now we want to find out why,
Yeah.
because we want to improve. And
Yeah.
by the way, excuse me, one reason why it might not be accepted is because they've just committed themselves to publishing a book very similar to yours. And they love yours. They
Yeah.
might even like yours better, but it doesn't matter because they've already made a commitment
Somebody got
and
there
they
first.
can't break the commitment with the other author, and they
Yeah.
have to publish that first.
Hmm.
And, they can't tell you that, because that they don't want to undermine their own author, right?
Right.
But they can decline politely. They can decline you politely, uh, and then go away and silently kick themselves. Because
Yeah.
man, we could have published Mike Rumley Wells, but we published this other person instead. Um, um, but like, if they have a reason for turning it down, which is not, we already have a book like that in the pipeline. Um, if they have a different reason, if they say, um, you know, we um, we don't like all the cussing. There's too
Hmm.
many cuss words
Yes.
in this book. Okay, well, now you have a decision to make. Do you want to, don't
Yep.
erase the
Yep.
first one, save it, but
Right.
go to Microsoft Word, click Save As, save it into a new
Cussy
name.
version.
Yeah, the clean version, right?
Yes.
And
And
say,
find and replace.
yeah, all the curse words, yeah, or just delete a bunch of them. Don't replace them with very. Please don't. Very is bad.
Okay,
Um,
everybody get that from your wordsmith coach. We don't need more very.
oh no. Um,
Really, really extremely very.
oh, yeah, really is a good one too that you can just delete everywhere you find it. But and for goodness sake, don't say really instead of a cuss word, because the cuss word was probably better. So so anyway,
Yes.
you can think, or maybe they're like, oh, it's not the language that bothered us so much, it's all the Bible verses.
Hmm.
Like, could we cut the Bible verses down like maybe in half? Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Now you have a decision to make.
Now you have a decision to make, but at least it's a clear one, and
Yes.
and you know why. It's like they didn't. You said, "Here's my heart and soul. What do you think?" And now they've told you, oh, your heart and soul is valuable except for all the cussing, or except for all the Bible stuff, or
Yeah.
except, we want you to cut out this chapter where, it's too graphic
Hmm.
about how exactly your son died, and it's going to trigger too many people,
Yeah.
and we just delete that chapter. And now you can decide, am I okay with deleting that chapter?
Yeah.
Am I okay with deleting the Bible verses? Am I okay with deleting all the profanity? Maybe not. But maybe you are. And remember, they haven't said, "Oh, we're for sure accept it if you make this change."
Right.
Maybe experiment. And they haven't given you a contract. Maybe you should make the change as an experiment, resubmit it, and then see.
Hmm.
And when a publisher actually offers you a contract, only at that time do you have to make a decision.
Mm.
And if you're like, well, look, I took all the profanity out, I took out all the Bible verses, and I've deleted the most important chapter. I I don't want to publish it like this.
Right.
Then you say no.
Now it has cut out my soul.
Right, right. Yeah, but
Really, right?
yeah, yeah.
Because
I've
it's
cut
no
my
longer
soul
the
out of
soul that
this.
I was offering, right? Now it
Hmm.
just kind of feels more like this empty vessel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to offer this in a package which you think is more commercially viable.
Right.
Because you're thinking when someone says that, like take out your soul
Hmm.
and make it as plain vanilla as possible, and then it's going to be more commercially viable. What you and I can then like sometimes when someone says more commercially viable, they want you to add more of your soul in. They want you to go deeper into it. They want you to
Yeah.
be less cliched and stuff.
Hmm.
But when you realize that the changes they're asking for rip your soul out of it, um, in order to make it more commercially viable, now that's when you're not selling out, you're not selling your soul, you're being asked to, you're being pressed down into the lowest common denominator of commercially viable product. And an author who is in it just to earn money, just to sell books, will do that with a clean conscience, and
No
and should
problem.
and should do it with a clean conscience, because their purpose is just to sell books.
Right.
This is I was
Yeah.
just reading an article
I'm
about
just trying to get published. Right.
yeah, yeah, the pulp fiction authors in the
Hmm.
1940s were just like this.
Hmm.
They're like, well, I don't know, like I'll write whatever you want. What do
Tell
you
me what
want?
will sell.
You
I'll
want
write
more
that.
sex? You want less sex?
Yeah.
You want more aliens? Oh, are we tired of aliens? Oh, robots then. Great, robots coming up.
Right.
You know, like they
More
would just
violence. More. Yeah. Sure.
yeah, yep.
Hmm.
Oh, but not against children. Okay, I'll make sure that children are never harmed in
Doesn't
my
sell.
books. Yep,
Hmm.
got it. No problem.
Yeah.
So, and look, if someone is watching this and you are that author, you just want to write to the market.
Hmm.
Knock yourself out. That's okay. That's fine, because you're not pouring your soul into it. You're pouring a different kind of creativity into it.
Hmm.
Um, and you're literally manufacturing a product,
Yeah.
which is going to be as commercially acceptable as possible, which means human beings will like it. But when you start looking at aggregating huge numbers of human beings, rather than um, building a relational network with human beings, it's a very different kind of salesmanship. It's a very different kind of marketing. When you start marketing Pepsi, flavored sugar water,
Right.
um, you know, someone's got to market Pepsi, I suppose. I'm never going to do it. Um, and neither you nor I are going to sit up until all hours of the night coming up with a special recipe with 11 herbs and spices or whatever,
Right.
a new soda, and I'm going to call it pepper soda. No, I want to make it sound more erudite. I will call it Dr. Pepper soda or whatever. Like, like you and I don't pour our soul, like
Right.
that's not a soul pouring thing
No,
for us,
not for us.
but we
Mhm.
would pour our soul into something else. So, uh, anyway, I hope that little tangent made sense to people who are watching.
Hope so too.
So
Made sense to us.
good. So we've gone almost an hour and a half.
We have.
We should probably end it now, and when I get around to editing these, it will be hopefully it'll be around an hour. But um, I'm just looking at set up your shop. Yeah, there's a lot of build your folder buckets. The proposal writing order, we talked about that. Consider pizzazz. And then the second to last one is add pizzazz. More pizzazz.
Oh, but
Zazz
I
it up.
do think proposal breakdown, maybe that's where we should come in
pick it up
next time.
there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I think because, there are pieces that it's very helpful to translate, okay, this is what they mean. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And all these little handles.
Mm-hmm.
The mission statement.
Yeah. You already gave me a helpful thought on what comps mean, right?
Oh, good. Yes.
Right?
I hope I did.
You did.
Okay, good.
And that's going to be our hook for next time. Come back next time and you'll hear what comps really mean.
There we go. All righty. Well, that's where we'll pick up. Thank you so much, Mike, for spending this time
Thank you, Nick.
with me and with everybody. I
Fun
really
to get
appreciate it.
excited. I can't wait to read Sell Your Soul.
Oh, it's so good. Of course, you'll have to read it under its other, its latest incarnation. But it really is an excellent book.
Okay.
Recommend it very highly. All righty. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in and watching this on our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us. Look forward to more dialogue.
That's right. And be sure to subscribe so that you can hear the next one, because we're coming up again next week. All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Yay.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.